Hello, and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we are here today recording on a Monday, right after this Seahawks-Lions game. We wanted to talk about it, and we wanted to record early because we're both very busy people. And so, as you can see, I am not in my usual recording spot if you're watching on YouTube. That is because, like I said, we're all over the place. But we are still going to get this to you guys, and it's going to be a great pod.
What is that? What is that painting behind you? Is that two bears? Is that two crows? What is that?
Elephants. They're touching trunks.
No way. Elephants. Whack, man. That's crazy.
This is what sits in my room at home, you know? Today we've got a lovely pod. We are not going to talk Storm for the first time in quite a while, but we do have a ton of football. We'll have some Mariners superlatives, and of course we got to touch on the Sounders making the playoffs. So it's going to be a nice full pod. Anything to say before we get started, John?
Nope, let's dive in.
All right, here is some Coyote Picnic. All right. We're switching it up this week, John. We're going value dogs first, right off the bat. We're excited. We are ready to talk about them, and we always finish with them. I feel like we need to give people what they want early so that they can back out if they really want to. For those of you that are just now joining, we just released a bunch of clips on YouTube, so you might be new to the pod. Value dogs. What we do is each of us picks 3 underdogs to cover the spread, because statistically, underdogs have covered more in the last half decade, than they have not. And so we each pick 3 underdogs to cover each week of the NFL season. Do you want to start first, John, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. I just want to shout out my 2-1 week coming off this last week. Those following us know I've been historically bad coming into this week. A lot of money has been shorting me recently. I've been making more money than the Rothschilds for my doubters, but not this week, baby. This week I got it all back with a 2-1 week, so wanted to pat my own back since you failed to do so in the intro there.
That's fair.
And then I'm just gonna jump. I'm gonna jump right in. For my first value dog of the week, I am going to take the Dallas Cowboys, the much maligned Dallas Cowboys, plus 2.5 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going into this season, this line would probably be the most surprising for somebody, who hadn't seen any games so far this year. They'd be like, what? This Dallas team is, giving 2.5 points to the Steelers? And there's some good reasons for that. This Steelers defense, which has been very vaunted, looked a lot more shaky against the Indianapolis Colts and old man Joe Flacco. Making me think that, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, resurgent, Rico Dowdle starting to do some stuff on the ground for them, might be able to put up some points for this Dallas offense. And as much as I love Justin Fields, this experiment has got to run into a wall at some point. This Dallas defense is begging for a get-right game. They've been so miserable this season, but I still believe that they have some pieces. I don't know. It just seems like sometimes you just have to look at 2 teams and be like, are the Steelers really going to beat the Cowboys? And I don't think they are.
That's fair. I think this week was the Steelers come back to earth week, where, they were, I think, minus 1.5 going into the Colts. And we were like, that feels like assured money for the Steelers, based on how they've been playing. This scares me purely because I feel like Dallas is more one-dimensional than the Colts. I think the Colts, have Anthony Richardson. They have Jonathan Taylor. They've got a way to spread the ball around. I don't think Dallas's run game is as potent as you laid out in my mind, so I stayed away from it, but I could totally see that Cowboys team, popping off against the Steelers.
Yeah, this is also a Dallas team that's 2-2. They do not want to fall to 2-3 in that division.
Yes.
So a bigger game for them than it is for the 3-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll see.
And especially with a surging Commanders team, they really can't fall behind them. That would be rough for their fan base.
Jaden Daniels, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, with my first pick for our Week 5 Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs, I am going to go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers plus 1.5 against the Atlanta Falcons. That feels like free money to me. I feel I am just not as in on the Falcons as I think everybody else is. I had the Saints plus 1.5 on them last week, which of course didn't cover because they got a pass interference with 50 seconds left that brought them to the 40-yard line. But that's beside the point. And my 1-2 week last week, I just think this Buccaneers team has proven throughout this season. I think they're 3-1. They've proven that they're a good team, that they can compete, and I don't think that Atlanta has proven that yet. They were in the game against the Chiefs, and they played a tough Eagles team. I think they're close, but I don't think they should be laying points at Tampa Bay or against Tampa Bay. Is kind of where I draw the line.
Sure, no, man. I think, this Buccaneers team has been so solid this year. Baker Mayfield is in MVP conversations. Their offense is just clicking in a very real way. This Falcons team, I'm still, kind of waiting to see what they're going to really look like. I feel like a lot of their pieces on offense have yet to click the way we would expect. Bijan hasn't been that good. Kyle Pitts is a continual disappointment. I'm surprised to see the Buccaneers given points here. I'm going to let you have it just because I don't want to double up today.
Look at you. What a guy.
But I like that line a lot. And I'm going to let you have it because there's a line I want to take, and I'm just kind of ready. I'm ready to rebel against myself a little bit, and I'm going to take, for the second straight week, the Carolina Panthers plus 3.5 against the Chicago Bears.
They didn't cover. This is crazy to me, actually. From last week, you were like out on the Rams plus 3, and now you're in on the Panthers plus 3.5 against this Bears team?
Well, so first things first, Rams did not cover. The Bears, I guess I get what you're saying. The Bears did cover the spread last week. But there's a big difference. It's a strength-on-strength thing that I am worried about here. This Bears offense has shown that they are not going to put up big points against anybody, at least not yet. Caleb has not really clicked offensively. The receivers have yet to really get going. So I'm not worried about the Bears putting up 28 points. I just don't think that's very likely. The Rams are so beat up, so few options, and this Bears defense is really good. I have a lot of respect for this Bears defense. And they were just able to basically shut down the Rams and let the Bears just control the game from start to finish. We've seen this Carolina offense underneath the tutelage of the Red Rifle himself. They've been really good. The last 2 weeks, they have been putting up points. That continued last week, a shootout against the Cincinnati Bengals that went down to the wire. Andy Dalton has got this group playing well. They've got Deontay Johnson looking like a solid wide receiver 1 again. And I just think if this Panthers team can stay close in the first half, I'm worried about the Bears just kind of crumbling a little bit with this rookie quarterback. They just haven't been playing. I've been watching very closely. I have Caleb Williams in a fantasy league, and I've just been none too impressed. So I'm going with the better quarterback in the game. I'm going with Andy Dalton. Give me 3.5 points.
That's funny. I have Caleb Williams in I think all of my fantasy teams, and I have yet to start him because he's like my backup QB. I'm sure he's going to be good in like week 9. But right now he's just not there, Yeah,
if this was a week 9 game, I would be less likely to like this line.
Yeah.
Less likely to like this line.
That was good. You did a good
times. Job. Thank
you. With my Week 5 pick number 2, I am going with the Saints plus 5 at Kansas City. I just really think the Saints are better than they've been given credit for. They had those 2 weeks, and in my mind, those 2 weeks really made them. They might have looked better than they are. Offensively, they might have been figured out, but Kansas City with a 5-point spread at any point is. You talked about it last week with the Chargers as well. Kansas City with any sort of spread greater than 3 points feels like free money to me, just because they only play close games. And I think this Saints team is kind of due for a bounce back. I think they had the correction that teams figured them out defensively. Now they're going to have to offensively adjust to how teams are playing them and be able to move the ball a little bit on KC. KC's also down Rashee Rice for the foreseeable future. At the very least, we haven't heard about his injury yet, I don't think.
It's pretty severe. They haven't released the diagnosis, but the odds of him playing again this season are quite low.
Yes. So I think this is, if you're going to get this, we are recording this on Monday night, like we said, after the Seahawks game. So if you're going to get this line at this value, I think it's pretty good. And And the Chiefs they haven't lost, and this is kind of the week to do it, coming off a big injury, letting the team kind of bounce back from what is a substantial loss to them.
The refs can only do so much for this Chiefs team. It's so ridiculous that they're 4-0. They could so easily be 0-4. It's just dumb. But their defense is really good, and they were able to just kind of pick on this relatively talentless Chargers offense they had in week 4. This Saints offense is a whole nother beast. I see what you see. I like +5 here as well. With my third and final value dog of the week, I can't believe I'm doing it, but you know what? I can believe, because it just worked, so it's going to work again. I'm taking the New England Patriots +1 against the Miami Dolphins. Guys, when are people going to figure out that this Dolphins team is completely untenable with its current construction and without Tua at quarterback? This team is the worst team in football as currently constructed. We just saw this Dolphins team get manhandled by a Will Levis-led Titans team that had backup Mason Rudolph of Pittsburgh Steelers infamy come in and control the game in the second half against the Miami Dolphins. Not only did Will Levis beat them, but Mason Rudolph also beat them. Jacoby Brissett's better than both of those guys. This Dolphins team, with their horrible backup quarterbacks, is the single worst team in the NFL. I'm going to take them every single week that their opponent is plus points. And the second that they're plus points, I know who my rancid dog of the week is. I know who it is as soon as it's Dolphins +1.5. Yeah, it's a no-brainer for me.
I can't argue with it. I didn't have it because these two shit teams scares me as a value dog. You know, I feel like either team could win that. Obviously, today is kind of a positive showing for you in that regard. It felt like the Titans were felt like the Titans were a team. It didn't feel like they had injuries to deal with. They were just kind of grinding through being bad. The Dolphins have just like been decimated. With the loss of Tua. So.
Yeah, and lost some defensive pieces. It's worth noting, Patriots defense, good.
Yeah.
Dolphins defense, very bad.
Like, Ramondre Stevenson could have 40 fantasy points next week.
I'm expecting the Patriots defense to score more touchdowns than the Dolphins offense.
That's a fair bet. All right, with the sixth and final pick for the Week 5 Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs, I'm going to go with, sadly, the Giants +6 against our Seattle Seahawks.
Wow.
I'm doing that solely because I think Malik Neighbors, I don't know if he'll be back. I think he came off injured at the end of this last week, but Malik Neighbors looked scary in that game against the Cowboys. And I think it's weird because the Lions, I expected their defense and Hutchinson to have a greater impact on the Seahawks offense, but the Seahawks scored 29 points against the Lions. I just think the Seahawks as a team are not constructed to pummel opponents. I think the Seahawks laying 6 points against a team with decent offensive weapons, and especially they're still pretty banged up. I think this Giants team can cover 2 field goals is where I'm at.
Yeah, you know what, man? I don't agree with you on this one, but I get where you're coming. 6 points. The fact of the matter is, 6 points is a lot of points, and this is the history of it. That these dogs be covering sometimes. So the Hawks could definitely win by 3 or 4 points, and you'd still be right. But if it was 7.5, I think I would understand it more. We'll talk obviously a lot about the Detroit game tonight after this section, but leave it to say for now, the Seahawks offense looked electric and borderline unstoppable without some timely officiating. Their defense looked bad. We'll talk more about that later too. But I still really believe in Mike McDonald and his plans for this defense. I believe in some of the young talent this defense has. They will play better than they did tonight. New York is also not Detroit. Detroit looked fantastic in terms of how dynamic they looked offensively. New York is not dynamic. They have one receiver, and they have a running back that's on his 4th team that nobody wanted, and they have a quarterback that even the fans of this team really, really want off the field. So, yeah, You know what? Giants have probably covered every spread so far this year. They probably have. I don't like it.
No, it's totally fair. I think this is one of those games where I watched the entirety of the Giants-Cowboys game, and I was actually kind of impressed with the Giants.
They would have covered +6 in that game.
Yeah, and granted, I think the Seahawks are better than the Cowboys, but I think the Giants... I just think the Seahawks are not built to pummel teams like I reminisce on the Ravens game last year against the Seahawks where they lost 30-3, and I just feel like that team is still in this team a little bit. Mm-hmm. So they still worry me quite a bit.
Sure. And to your point, they played the way they did tonight partially because they had to, because they were down early and were constantly trying to even the score or get it back to one score. So that isn't necessarily how Ryan Grubb always wants to play. So, heard.
All right, let's talk Seahawks-Lions. We've kind of been leading into this game for a little bit here. What were your initial reactions right off the bat? This game ended an hour and a half ago. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts right off the bat were, my goodness, am I so glad that we have Ryan Grubb in here working his magic on this offense. And I'm so glad that Shane Waldron is half a continent away.
Look at you, getting the name right.
Bro, it took me. I had to stop Steichen from coming out of my mouth. Shane Waldron. But no, this offense, obviously, we lost this game. Seahawks lost 42-29 in a game that was much closer than that score would indicate. But this Seahawks offense looked dynamic. Geno looked very solid. He had a costly pick. His completion percentage, 38-56, not as high as you would like to see. But he was getting the ball downfield to his receivers in space, and really moving the ball around. He had at least 2 completions to 2, 4, 6, 8 different receivers. That's wild. And it speaks to the fact they weren't able to run the ball as much as they would like, considering they were down at least 2 scores for most of the game. Kenneth Walker only had 12 carries, and Charbonnet only had 2. So only 14 carries by running backs, despite really good averages on those carries. They had to pass the ball, they had to throw it downfield, and they were doing it really effectively. It was just so refreshing to see them play a more dynamic style of offense than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think just the ability to spread the ball, it is kind of flustering to see them rely on Geno Smith for 56 pass attempts. Just numbers wise, that's not even something that we had ever with Russell Wilson.
Sure.
And to see that change, it is reminiscent of more of the like UW style of offense, where it was a lot of, even when he was kind of trying to get the run game involved, it's short passes, screens, things like that, where it's kind of dump offs, which are nice. I think those keep people engaged. And Kenneth Walker is a running back who can do that, which is nice. Same with Charbonnet. He had 5 receptions and Walker had 4. Like those 2 guys combined for 75 yards of passing there. So just a good spread. I think the big thing for me, I was listening to this game on the radio, and it was the DK fumble. I think immediately at the end of that first quarter really just threw the game out of whack for the Seahawks there. You go down basically 2 scores. I think the Lions had the ball on the 14-yard line coming into I guess at the end of that first quarter, and it's just so hard. You're in a great spot. You're set to tie the game at 7-7 off a really good reception, and then DK just loses the football on a play where he's trying to gain more yardage, but he's just the longer you're up trying to fight for yards, the more likely you are to lose the ball. And so it's just a tough case of like he's trying valiantly, and it's just not necessarily what the team needed at that time, especially that early in the game. And it just sets you behind. It's just something that happens.
Yeah, you said that well. He had an awesome game, 7 receptions, 104 yards. No huge chunk plays, but just constantly an outlet for these 16-yard passes. Really good use of his size and strength. But yeah, just one of those situations, and it's not just DK. You see it all over the NFL. We saw a very similar play from the rookie tight end, A.J. Barner, as well, where it's just like, think about what you're risking for what you're trying to gain. If that was a 2nd or 3rd down and DK was short of the 1st down and he was trying to fight for that extra yardage, that's a little more forgivable. He had the 1st down. there was safety help over the top. He wasn't, that wasn't the last tackle.
He wasn't going to pop for a touchdown.
Correct. That's the situation. It's like, man, stop fighting these guys. Just go down and protect the ball. And he failed to do that. A.J. Barner, like I said, the tight end, had a play where he hurdled a dude in the middle of the field with 4 Detroit defenders around him. And he luckily landed on his back with the football in his hands. But it's like, bro, what are you doing trying to hurdle right now? You're not getting away from anybody. Even if that's the cleanest, most perfect hurdle of all time, you're getting tackled 1 second later. Don't go flying up over your back with the football in your hands as a rookie. It was just... Those plays drive me a little crazy sometimes, but it's the NFL. Everyone does everything they can for extra yards. So, but it was a momentum killer in a game where people were scoring on basically every single drive.
Yeah.
Pretty crucial to give up a drive and turn it around. Detroit scored on the next play or 2 plays after that, so that's what put them in their early deficit. On the other side of the ball, the Seahawks defense, I guess, first things first. Anybody that watched that game, those Detroit uniforms were fucking sick. Sorry to swear. They were so cool, man. The all blacks with the Detroit blue.
No, those were nice.
So nice. My new favorite unis in the NFL. But, Seahawks defense was way too busy staring at the uniforms to do anything effectively. They were awful. The Lions were just running all over them. This is a game where Jared Goff of
the guy of 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions starting last week.
Correct. Went 18 for 18 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, smashing the record for most yards without missing a pass and most completions without missing a pass in a game in NFL history. This guy was breaking records with dudes in like the 1950s. And it's Jared Goff doing that against your defense. So they just didn't show up in the way they had to. Shout out to him, obviously, for getting the job done. Some of that's just he really had an on night. But between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who threw a 7-yard touchdown to Jared Goff, the Detroit Lions did not miss a pass they attempted all game. The running game was effective between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and they just worked up and down the field on this Seahawks defense. I was really not impressed. I know they were working through some injuries. Julian Love got hurt in the game and did not return. He's obviously a very big part of that defense. But, disappointing is what I would say.
This is something we talked about last week with just the injuries to Leonard Williams, the injury to Byron Murphy. Like, our defensive line was just unable to create any sort of stoppage. They didn't have a field goal. They had 6 touchdowns and 3 punts. So it was just one of those games where as soon as they would get in the red zone, they could run it down our throats, and the passing rush threat wasn't there, so that Jared Goff had plenty of time in the pocket and was able to move freely. You really felt the absence of our defense there, and it was something I think we touched on it last week that we were pretty scared of. So it wasn't surprising, I would say, but it is something that is concerning moving forward. Is we really are going to need these backup linemen to step up, or it's going to be a long few weeks without these guys if they're going to be injured for a while. So, I think McDonald has his work cut out for him over the next little bit, and we will see how this team responds. Next week is nice to be against the Giants, but for now, defensively, it's looking challenging. And more power to the Lions. I think the Lions are much better than they seemed coming into this week.
Yes.
And that's just kind of, everybody's been in on the Lions, and I think did they start off 0-1, and people were kind of like, what is happening? Or they started off maybe 1-1. I don't remember exactly, but
no, they had a tough start to the year. They lost they won their first game against the Rams, but it was a very close game. The Rams almost won that one in overtime. And then they lost to the Bucs and barely beat the Cardinals. So people their offense had put up 16, 20, and 26 points going into tonight, where they dropped 42 on us. So their offense had not hit their stride the way people were expecting. Unfortunately, they found their stride against us.
Yeah, and I think this is the week that people were expecting. Everybody had their eyes on this game, and they were like, "Hey, the Lions need to get their offense right because they have all these weapons." And we definitely were the recipients of what was a pretty rough drubbing on the defensive side of the ball for us.
100%. Yeah, but overall, I think better days for the defense are coming between injuries and coaching schemes. I think things will be better. We're also not playing many offenses this talented. I just want to give another second shout out already to Ryan Grubb. Through 4 games this season, the Hawks have scored 26, 23, 24, and 29 points. We were very excited to get to 20 points last year. So the fact that we've done that every single game is encouraging, including against, some stout Broncos and Patriots defenses. Loving the Ryan Grubb system.
Yeah, I think he's made Geno look a lot better than I think we gave him credit for. I know you're still not super high on Geno as a QB, but I think he's played really well within this system, and he's not trying to do too much. And Grubb is actually maximizing Geno's potential, I think, pretty well. Geno's much more of a cerebral quarterback. I think he's not as much of a dynamic talent guy. He's more of a go through my reads, get it to the right guy, and I think he's done that very well. I think Grubb is that tandem has worked well, and I think Grubb as a guy works well with more cerebral quarterbacks, which is why I think the Sam Howell call might be a little tough to make once it comes to that point. What are you trying
to say? No, what's funny is the Geno Smith, Michael Penix Jr. comparisons in terms of how they play the game, in terms of
those are real.
Their size and strength and the way they, like to sit in the pocket. But once they get out of the pocket, they'll get you 10 yards on the ground, but that's not how they like to play. There were some real comparisons there. So, I agree. He's getting the most out of Geno. I'm not calling for any heads just yet. Sam Howell, he's learning this system behind Geno. When he comes in, he's gonna be good and ready. Next game, October 6th against the Giants. We already touched on it, but it should be a good matchup. Giants are an interesting team. I expect the Hawks to get right and win that. Get to 4-1 on the season. Hey, great thing about being 3-0, you can afford a loss. So we'll take that one on the chin and keep pressing forward. Yeah,
I think the concern there with the Giants is you got to be able to contain Neighbors, who, again, we're not sure if he's going to be even playing next week. Singletary's a decent back. He hasn't really shown too much ability to kind of explode for big plays, which is nice. The Seahawks team has a tendency to allow those. So I think we'll see what this Giants team can do. I'm not worried about Daniel Jones as a QB threat.
Nor should you.
My main concern is, can Malik Neighbors, if he's healthy, carry this Giants team? And Kayvon Thibodeau is a little bit of a concern on the defensive line, especially if our offensive line continues to be injured. But I still think the Seahawks should win this game, and it shouldn't feel too scary.
Agreed.
All right. What do you want to jump to next? Do you want to go UW or do you want to talk Wazoo?
Both very disappointing. The atrocious is what we're choosing between there. Okay, let's start with Wazoo because there's a little more positivity to talk through there.
Yeah.
This was a fun game for a majority of the game. This was a back and forth affair. Wazoo tied it twice in the first half, and then things kind of got away from them a bit in the second half. But I don't know what the main takeaway from this game can be other than Ashton Genty?
I don't know. Yeah, I think
it's Genty.
Dude, he's a beast. He's so gnarly.
He's like if you took prime Derrick Henry and put him in college football behind a solid line. And he was unbelievable. 26 carries for 260 yards and 4 touchdowns. 10 yards per carry. Now, obviously, there's something to be said about the Washington State defense and how they were able to defend against the run. But this guy has been an absolute monster against everybody.
Everybody. It doesn't matter who he's playing. The guy's going for 200 yards a game.
Yeah, he has. I just saw the stats earlier. I need to pull it up. Through this year so far. It's so ridiculous. Last year, he had 1,350 yards and 14 touchdowns. Okay, that's pretty good. What is he this year?
Dude, he's 82 carries for 845 yards this year. 845 yards in 4 games this year. He's 10.3 yards a carry, 13 touchdowns through 4 games.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you've just said that, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it one more time. 82 carries for 840 yards and 13 touchdowns through 4 games. That means he is averaging 3.25 touchdowns scored per game. He's averaging 210 yards rushing per game, and he's doing that on an average clip of 10.1 yards per rush. Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. This is a Boise team that could easily be 4-0. They lost 37-34 in an absolute battle with number 7 in the nation, Oregon. Yeah, we were a little disrespectful, I think, maybe thinking this one would be as close as it was, with this guy being the kind of monster that he has been. But outside of him, if we just remove arguably the best player in college football, this was a really, really close game. And I liked the way that Wazoo played. Yeah, I guess I have some thoughts, but what were your big takeaways other than our boy?
I think this was a game. This was not a surprise what happened in this game. I thought that Boise State's offense wasn't going to be as efficient as it was. I think it did show some flaws in the Wazoo defense. Another thing that happened was John Mateer really didn't do too much in terms of using his legs. He had one 52-yard run, but he had 20 carries for 28 yards. That means that 18 of those were probably for -1 yards. He was just constantly having to battle and struggling to get out of the pocket. And the one time he did, he was able to create something. But this Boise State team really contained him well. And I think, yeah, it's definitely something where Wazoo is going to have to step away from this game thinking we did as good as we can, and they have a bye week this week, which is nice for them. But we did what we could. But I think their game plan going against these tougher opponents has got to change a little bit, and their defense just needs to improve. I think you're going against one of the best running backs that we've seen in the last half decade.
Sure.
Like this guy is he's going to be in the Heisman conversation at the end of the season, just purely by numbers. If not, he's going to win it.
He has a full season of stats already. This is a great running back season.
This is like what the UW running backs had at the end of last season. Like it's crazy statistically right now. So yeah, I think this Boise State team, Wazoo just wasn't really built to beat them. Wazoo's not a really run defense. They're
not much of an anything defense, but particularly not a run stopper.
So I think it was just kind of they met an unstoppable force there in Ashton Shinty.
Yeah. I do just want to shout out the Wazoo offense. I think 45-24 makes it seem worse than it was. Like I said, they were down 7 going into the half, and then, gave up a touchdown and then scored a touchdown right away again to make it 24-17 again. They were keeping it close, and then things just kind of got away from them as Genty kept putting them in quite literally in the dirt and building up that pressure. But I was still impressed with this Wazoo offense. Shout out to Kyle Williams and Chris Hudson, who have both been awesome receivers this year, both with 9 receptions and 120 plus yards. Really, really nice targets for Mateer. And then I got to shout out my boy John Mateer. This is a game, you said it, ripped off a 52-yard run and somehow finished with 28 total yards on 20 attempts. So he was trying to get things done with his legs, and it was not working other than that nice, big, beautiful run to start the game. But with him being constrained to the pocket, he did really well. 26 for 37, 330 yards and 2 touchdowns. One costly pick, but this guy continues to show. They took away a big part of his game, this Boise State defense. They took away that running game that has been so deadly the last couple of weeks. And he still had a very solid, if not downright excellent, quarterback game, throwing for 330 yards, trying to keep this team in it with some of these drives. So yes, I do think this was one that they were probably going to lose. If they ran the simulation 15 times, they probably lose it 15 times with Ashton playing the way he has. But expect to see this Boise State team climbing in the rankings. This team is going to make the playoff, in my opinion. I don't think anybody wants any smoke with them. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's take this one on the chin and move on. They do not play this next week. The next game will be October 12th against Fresno State in a much friendlier matchup for Wazoo.
Yeah. You said it well. Mateer had a great game as a quarterback. I think we've highlighted his ability to run, but just his efficiency was much improved this week, and I think that was because he knew what he had to do, changed up his ideas, and his game plan, and proceeded to have a decent game. His one interception came really at the end of the first half. I think trying to push for a late score to tie it up. So nothing really to be upset about there, especially because it didn't turn into any points. So I think overall it was a good game. And yeah, looking ahead to Fresno State, this is another future Pac-12 matchup that hopefully we can capitalize on. And Wazoo can come away feeling better after that game than they do about this Boise State game. Push this one behind them. Boise State's going to finish number 10 in the nation. I really think that. So they will be in the playoff and likely going up against this Oregon team or something like that here pretty quick again.
Wazoo, in a way, this was a win for Wazoo because that is Pac-12 opponent Boise State that's showing out on the national stage like that. That's future Pac-12 alum Ashton Genty who's going to contend for the Heisman this year, and that's a win for Boise State if I've ever heard one. So we take our small victories in the Pac-12 and move on. All
right, let's talk a little less nice about what was one of the ugliest games that I've seen of college football in quite a while in this Washington versus Rutgers match. Washington loses 18-21, and I don't even know where to start. UW misses 3 field goals. They missed 2. What was it? I think it was a 41 or like a 40-yarder and a 41-yarder or something like that. It was just ugly. You're just shaking your head. What are your thoughts right now?
It was gross. And I'm not talking about the quality of the game. I'm talking it's Grady Gross's fault. The kicker Grady Gross was the problem in this game. This is going to go down probably as the most frustrating game of the college football season for me personally. Unbelievable that UW did not win this game. 18-21. This was their game. They won this game. They won it. They did it. They played. They did what they needed to do. They executed. They won the game, except for this guy named Grady Gross. I sure hope they've got a good backup somewhere. If not, they need to wander down to the soccer fields and see if they can pick up one of their players to start practicing. I don't want to see Grady Gross in a UW jersey again after that performance. He made 1 of his 4 field goals. He made the 22-yarder. Good for him for kicking through the extra point. But that's basically all he was able to accomplish. If you look at the game stats for this game, UW won this game. They won first downs 23-15. Total yards 521 to 300. Almost doubled up the total yards of Rutgers. Beat them in passing yards, 3-to-1 ratio in passing yards. Beat them in rushing yards. Had only 2 more penalties, more return yards. Yards per play was way better. They had 0 turnovers. They did not turn the ball over offensively. The only thing that happened, you can put a little bit blame on the coaching staff for not being able to turn more of these drives into touchdowns, thus removing the opportunity for Grady Gross to fuck things up. But other than that, this came down to a kicker failing to do the one job that is given to him, and not in spectacular fashion. They were not asking him to kick a bunch of 50-yarders. You are right that he had to kick a 41 and a 43, which are pretty long for college football. But then his other one was like a 34-yarder, and he missed that one too. I don't know what to say about Grady Gross.
He was abysmal. It's crazy because last year he was the guy we gave him a scholarship because he played so well, and we won those Oregon games because of him. It was. I have a short memory. It was tough to see, especially for a guy that a lot of the UW fans have been rooting for the last year because of his success. I mean, to sum it up, if they're kind of pushing down the stretch to get these scores, they get into a position. I think he has to kick. I forget what the last field goal was. I think it was like a 52-yarder. Let me look it up really quick. 55 yards. So he missed a 55-yarder. It had the distance, but a 55-yard field goal is...
We don't expect that.
We don't expect that from a college kicker. The other two that he missed was a 37 and a 42-yard field goal. Those are field goals that he should make. And if you're in that situation, you don't have to worry about rushing down the field and kicking a 55-yarder if you make those. The other big thing that happened that we really need to touch on was UW had a blocked field goal. They blocked a field goal, ball's bouncing around, and then one of the players on the sideline runs onto the field because he's celebrating before the ball is blown dead. UW gets a flag, Rutgers get 5 yards and a first down, and they score a touchdown off that. That's at least 10-point swing, if not more.
That is an excellent point. That's probably even worse than what Grady did on the field. I just can't get over 1 for 4.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And just in that situation, that's kind of the coach's fault. Like, as much as it is the player's fault, the coaches need to teach these guys that you can't go on the field till the play is blown dead. All these things. That's just like a coaching mishap. And I'm sure that player had a very, very largely enforced punishment at the end of this game.
You blame the coach, man. I'm blaming the mother. Like that, you need to take the belt out more if people are acting like that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was an abysmal game to watch. Like you said, penalty wise, Washington only had I think 2 more than Rutgers, and it just felt like they were behind all game from the start, basically after they go down 7-3, and they just never felt like they could come back. Like it was just struggle after struggle after struggle, in a game that they should have won, and this was their first Big Ten matchup. They play Michigan this week, which crazily enough they're favored in this game. But
that blows me away.
Yeah, it's super disappointing. I don't know where to start and stop with this team right now. We've had the 2 losses be super, super disappointing, and I think it seems like it's the coach's fault. Like in general, obviously field goal kicking is not something you can control, but the play calling, like they've been really struggling in the red zone. Their defense feels fine. Like I'm not upset with the Belichick defense. Offensively, they really struggle when they get in the red zone, and we need to come away with more than just field goals.
But with that being said, too, I don't want to push too much on the offensive thing because this offense has been humming. This offense hummed against Rutgers.
That's the thing. It's just like it feels like we should be 5-0 in the top 25.
Correct. And that's it. It's like you have to point at something. The issues are happening with the execution offensively, but at the same time, the offense is executing. Will Rogers was 26 of 36 for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. He played an excellent game. Running game, Jonah Coleman, 16 carries, 148 yards, 9 yards per carry. That is excellent. Backup running back Cameron Davis, 8 carries for 42 yards, 5 yards per average carry. That is very, very good. Denzel Boston, our best receiver, 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. What more could you possibly ask for? Like, things are working, but for whatever reason, you look at the box score, and this offense only puts up 18 points. That's the part that I don't understand. And part of that, to your point, is red zone offense. Denzel's obviously, getting some scores on some bombs. He got a 51-yard touchdown for one of those. But yeah, so maybe that's really what it is. How much of this can just be pointed to in terms of red zone disappointment? Because they're obviously getting into the red zone, failing to convert, and then giving that ball to that son of a bitch Brady Gross or Grady Gross. And he's blowing things for us, but yeah, if
you couldn't tell, this is John Kerry After Dark, by the way.
Yeah, I'm also just it is. It's late and I get ornery. But it's just meant to express the frustration of this team. It's 2 losses, both failing to cross the 20-point threshold. When we see on the field talented players executing successfully, why isn't this working?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We said it. It's the red zone. In the Washington State game where they lost, it was the penalties. We talked about that. I think it's just the ability to be disciplined as a team, whether it's penalties, whether it's red zone efficiency, these things, it all kind of points and kind of pushes things at the coach. And this is a coach going through his kind of growing pains. It's his first year at UW. He got a whole new set of a coaching staff. But it's something you need to be able to iron the kinks out, and they need to do it actively right now, or this season is going to go down the drain. They've got a tough game against Michigan. They've got a game against Oregon coming up. They've got USC. They've got Iowa. All these teams are better than Rutgers. They're going to have a tough season if they can't fix these things. And yet, they are still -2.5 against Michigan.
Yeah, and part of that is encouraging. Part of that makes me think people are seeing that this offense can do the things last year's offense did. They see a quarterback that is like a quintessential pro who has a high completion percentage, who's pushing the ball downfield, and who's avoiding turnovers, and we've got a really solid running game behind this offensive line. So that warms me a little bit. What else am I missing? Why is the number 10 ranked team in the country +2.5 against a 3-2 UW team, at Washington?
I think it's at Washington. It's a rematch of the college football championship from last year, where I think they're probably expecting that the environment is going to be a bigger factor than normal, is what I would bet, first of all. Second of all, their quarterback is not good. Warren has 444 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. I don't really know how this team is ranked number 10 in the nation. They have one loss, which I believe was to Oregon. No, it was to Texas early on in the season.
Yes,
but their games have been
number 1 Texas in the country.
Yeah, their games have been close. They beat USC 27-24. They just beat Minnesota 27-24. I think what we're seeing is people believe in this UW team, this UW offense. They think it's going to get fixed. And matchup-wise, they have to run the ball, and their running game is not as good as even a Rutgers. Like, I think Michigan relies super heavily on their defense right now. That's how they're winning these games. And it's that in their rushing game, and I think their rushing game is not even as potent as Rutgers. Rutgers' main running back, who we didn't even talk about in that game, Kyle Monungai, 25 carries for 132 yards. He had a really good game, and he's a guy similar to Ashton Jeanty, not statistically, but as a build, he is a guy that can rush and get big chunks. So I think Michigan is going to be just a different type of opponent that I think UW is more built to handle defensively. And offensively, they've been humming. Like you said, Will Rogers hasn't turned the ball over. He's been good so far this season.
Yeah, no interceptions through 5 games is very encouraging from your college quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're making good points. Michigan's offense is about as one-dimensional as any offense in college football. They do not throw the ball down the field. They count on their running game dominating and their defense being very good. I'm not sure their defense is as good as people think they are.
No.
I really wish that this was like UW +3.5, so I could say, take the UW line. It's a great line. This is going to be a good game. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about -2.5. Yeah, any closing thoughts on the spread?
Take UW -2.5. They're going to win this game.
Okay, I love to see it.
Lock it in.
It's a big one for UW. They cannot go 3-3.
They can't be 3-3. No,
there's too many good games left for them to be in that position right now.
Yep. All right, John. That was football for week 5 or I guess this is week 6 of college football and week 5 of NFL. We're already almost halfway through the college season and a third of the way through NFL season. How are we feeling about football in general? Are you as excited? Football's been a little weird so far.
Oh, I love it. My fantasy teams are great. The teams I want to win aren't doing well, but the sport remains interesting. Parity is strong in both professional and college levels. Other than Georgia losing to Alabama, it's been pretty good for me so far.
Yeah, I feel like we'll have a bigger discussion on football in general, I'm sure, once we're out of kind of the Mariners season and everything like that. But it's definitely been an interesting one. Let's jump to a different type of football in the Seattle Sounders.
Football.
I'm working on my segues right now, is what I'm doing.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah, the Sounders this last week, they beat the Houston Dynamo 1-0, and they secured a playoff spot. How are we feeling? This team came back from nothingness early on in the season. We were so out on them. We didn't even talk about them 2 weeks ago because we just hated their guts because of how they've been playing. And yet, they are set to compete in the MLS playoffs.
Yeah, they have done a good job crawling their way back. A lot of the concerns remain the same, but they are starting to resemble the team we expected coming in. Their defense has been electric, and it's been a pretty good sample size. Over their last 6 matches played, going back to that semifinal loss against LAFC, they have only allowed 4 goals scored in 6 matches. So, roughly 0.67 goals per match. That's outstanding. That's really, really good. More zeros on the board than individual goals in the last 6. And their offense has been doing enough, largely, to get wins in those situations. Obviously, a 1-0 win over Houston, which the only goal was scored in the 22nd minute. So, yeah, I guess glad that we're going to have an opportunity to watch them in the postseason. Teams put together runs, and this is a team with the defense that they have. What they say about defenses and championships. They have a chance to put something together. I want to see these last 3. They're on a nice streak. In their last 4, they're 3-1-0. That's 3 wins, 1 draw, 0 losses. I want to see these next 3 against Vancouver, Colorado, and then would love to get that win in the rivalry rematch. Goodness gracious, that's a lot of re's. The rivalry rematch against the Portland Timbers. And if they can go 2-1 over these next 3, I think I'd be a lot more encouraged, as they could probably climb up to the 4 seed going into the playoffs. Currently sitting in at number 5.
Yeah, you're really testing your language today.
Yeah. It's late at night too.
Yeah, I'm excited. This end of the season, they've got 3 games left. They're technically 2 points away from being the number 2 seed in the West too. If they could jump up to that would be pretty amazing. Passing up LAFC, are this podcast's arch rival.
Dude, if we pass up LAFC, there's no justice in the world. That team has completely run over us every time we played them this season. If we get a higher rank than them, that'd just be sinful.
It would be bad. But yeah, this team has a chance. They played this week against Vancouver on Wednesday, which at the time of recording obviously has not happened, but when you guys listen, they might have already won that game. So we will see. But yeah, it's the good thing is they don't have to worry. They've secured a playoff spot. Obviously, they would like to climb, but if they lose if they lose the next 3 games, it doesn't necessarily matter, which is nice as well. Okay. Yeah. Anything else to say about the Sounders before we kick it off into some fun discussion about the Mariners? It's not going to be sad playoff. I guess missing. Just shedding tears.
No, yeah,
we're not going to do that on this pod.
About my language. No, please.
Dude, that's why I'm saying you're doing well. I've been crappy all day today.
No, I'm good. Let's talk some M's.
All right. So we talked last week about the Mariners and their more or less disappointing season, and how they were going to miss the playoffs. And this week, we didn't want to talk about that at all. We wanted to talk superlatives. We wanted to give some awards for the Mariners, and so we each came up with some picks, which may or may not be the same, but we came up with 4 selections. The 4 selections for superlatives were Team MVP, Team Cy Young, Best Surprise, and Biggest Disappointment. Those were the 4 categories that we were each picking a player for. What do you want to start with there, John?
Let's save the surprise and disappointment, since I suspect those will be the most controversial.
Yes.
And let's start. We also should say we caveated that our MVP could not be a pitcher, which is why we set aside the Team Cy Young.
Yep.
So let's start with the team MVP. A lot of talk about the bats on the Mariners. Who is your team MVP for the 2024 season?
There was some thought for me. It could go to a guy like Victor Robles, a guy who really sparked this offense. but he didn't play for the whole season. You could talk about Julio, but this guy did not play at an all-star level for the whole season. You know who did, John? Cal Big Dumper Raleigh. Cal Raleigh, 34 home runs, 100 RBIs, 120 hits, a batting average of 220, which isn't great, on-base percentage of 312, slugging 436 with an OPS of 748. This guy is the best catcher in Major League Baseball. That's not hyperbole. That's just me telling you the truth here. This guy's the best catcher in Major League Baseball. He's 98th percentile in framing. He's one of the best just like pitch stealers. I think he had the most strikeouts stolen on the season. And I think just Cal Raleigh is probably one of the most underrated players because he plays in Seattle and catcher's kind of an underrated hitting position. But the guy to have an OPS at close to 750 as a catcher is huge. And to be doing that while also being one of the best defensive catchers in all of the league. This guy has just been amazing this entire year. It really sucks to waste this type of season from Cal Raleigh and the pitching staff. And obviously this guy leads that pitching staff as well. So just an all-around super important guy to this team. It's crazy to think he's only been in the league for, 3 or 4 years now. I've loved watching him grow as a player, and this year was kind of the cherry on top. He was the MVP of this Seattle Mariners team.
Okay, so the thing is, it's like, okay, I'm just going to go Julio, right? Why wouldn't you just go Julio? So I was looking at Julio Rodriguez's statistics for 2024, and then I was looking at Cal's. And it turns out that it's actually just Cal, which I was really surprised by. I was like, okay, maybe there's no argument for Cal, but there's not really an argument. I guess first thing I want to shout out from Cal, obviously an excellent defensive catcher. And we know that he brings, slugging and home run power to a team that desperately needs it. What I am so encouraged by in his 3 seasons in the MLB so far, his home run counts have increased every single year. 27 in 2022, 30 in 2023, and now 34 this year. He is not only maintaining elite power at the catcher position, he's actually improving. He also had 6 stolen bases this year. Which I think is just wild.
That's the most by a Mariners catcher, by the way.
Bro, it's insane. Watching that guy run, you would never think he'd be able to steal a base, but shout out to Cal. He had 120 hits on the year, which is only 35 less than Julio. His batting average is 50 points less, but his slugging is 20 points better, 40 points better on the year. Yeah, and in terms of consistency, Julio turned into an absolute flamethrower in late August and through September. But Cal's been doing it basically throughout the entire year. And there have been so many times throughout this season where we said, who's floating? Cal. Cal hit 2 dingers this week, something like that. Yeah, I love him to death. And yeah, just can't give it to Julio, especially in a year where he only finished with 20 home runs, which is about half of what we were expecting.
Look at this turn. I need the people listening to this podcast to go back to March, whatever Wednesday was right before the Mariners season, when John and I were talking Mariners predictions, predictions for war, all these things. And John was constantly saying, Cal Raleigh needs to get on base more. His batting average isn't enough. This man has turned a corner, and I appreciate that from you, my friend.
I would also love if he bat 260, which he did not do. His batting average actually regressed from last season, which I hate to see, but this year, more than any year, I was able to really appreciate Cal for what he is.
Yes.
Savant page, pretty red, I'll say that.
Yeah. I will say, 2024, 7th in total walks in the American League with 70 walks. He had an 11.1 base on ball percentage, which is awesome for him. 10th in the American League in RBIs. Obviously, he got to 100 there. And then 8th in the American League in home runs at 34. And granted, this guy's been in the top 16 in the American League in the last 3 years in home run totals. But this guy has been just really good across the board in terms of the league. It's not just for the Mariners. We talk a lot about him being the power source for the Mariners, but there's not a lot of guys in the league who hit 34 home runs. Like he's a great power hitter, and it's really understated.
Sure. A great note on the walks too goes a long way to boost. The 220 batting average hurts, but 312 on base percentage is pretty good, pretty serviceable relative to most players. And that
especially when you look at a guy like Julio too. Like his walk percentage is so much lower.
Yeah, and their OBP looks a lot more similar despite that difference in average. So, he's a guy that he's smarter in at bats than you would think, given a 220 average. But he either generates walks or he swings for the fences, and when you do that, you're going to strike out a lot. But that's how you get to 34 home runs.
Yeah. All right. You ready to move to the next award?
Jinx, baby. Let's move on to Team Cy Young. I think we're going to agree here, so I'm just going to give the short version and then let you give the advanced statistics, assuming I'm right. I am taking Logan Gilbert, the 6'6", 215-pound, lock-flowing, gorgeous individual out of Stetson University. Finished the year 9-12, which is pretty surprising.
Crazy. It's crazy.
He only had 9 wins to 12
with a sub 500 winning percentage. Jesus Christ.
And he had a 0.89 whip. That might be the best statistical baseball anomaly of all time. 3.23 ERA. Just an absolute monster this year. I can't believe he finished 9-12. That's too funny. He has the most unbelievable baseball savant page you have ever seen in terms of his value and pitching statistics. He is 99th percentile breaking run value, 96th percentile pitching run value, 82nd percentile off-speed run value. He is in the 100th percentile in pitching extension. That means nobody in Major League Baseball extends like that guy does when he's pitching, which makes sense because he's 6'6" and lanky as hell, and really reaches. 95th percentile in walk rate, 89th percentile in whiff rate. That means those two together are really nice too. That means he is not walking people. He's controlling the ball, but he's also making people miss constantly. 88th percentile in fastball velocity. He can huck it. 87th percentile in expected earned run average. I just don't know what to say about this guy. He's one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, you look at his counting stats. The guy had the most innings in baseball. He pitched the most innings in baseball this season. 11th in runs allowed, which is awesome. He finishes 8th in the American League in just total home runs, which is actually, he let up a lot of home runs, which was where most of the damage came from. He's also 10th in the American League in losses, total losses. So love that for him. But he finishes 3rd in strikeouts. He's obviously got that .89 whip. He's a player who we've known was great, and we've kind of had him on the back burner of our minds of just oh, this guy's been good. We didn't expect him to take this kind of leap coming into this season. He's got a 4.6 base on ball percentage and a 27.4 strikeout percentage. The guy's his strikeout to walk ratio is just so nice. He's obviously got that 3.1 ERA. And you look at his splits, he does the same thing against righties and lefties. That splitter that he unlocked this year is something that allowed him to pitch to both sides of the plate and really see the same exact results. He had 18 walks to lefties, 19 walks to righties, 107 strikeouts to lefties, 113 strikeouts to righties. The whip is a little bit different just because I think lefties had a little bit higher hit percentage than righties, which is fair. You see a little bit of that sway. But in general, the guy was just a solid pitcher through and through. I can think of 6 starts that he threw 7 innings and probably could have gone more, but the Mariners held him back because they're the Mariners. It's just something that was great to see this entire season. And I think he didn't ever have a time. He was never a guy that we thought was floundering. I don't think we ever had a discussion on Logan Gilbert having a bad start or two. We talked about George Kirby struggling, Bryce Miller struggling, Brian Wu didn't really, but that's because he missed the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, when you miss as much time as he did, you're just excited to see him on the plate.
Yes. Logan Gilbert was just consistently a guy who was doing awesome things from the mound for this Mariners team. Somebody who's going to get maybe top 5 Cy Young votes, at the very least top 10 Cy Young votes. It was just an all around one of the best pitching seasons by a Mariner in quite some time.
Yeah, last thing I want to touch on is just how ridiculous his pitch distribution and movement profile is. It's just fantastic, and it's more of a visual thing. So please go to Baseball Savant, look up Logan Gilbert. But the fact that he's a 5-pitch guy. He has 5 pitches he throws at least 10% of the time between his slider, 4-seam, splitter, curveball, and cutter. And And he's not only does he put them all in different places, if you look at the profile, he's putting his curveball in the lower left quadrant. He's got his cutter in the upper left, four seamers in the upper right, splitters mid right, and then his sliders going right down the middle. But he's also getting different induced breaks on those pitches. His curveball is breaking upper left. His slider is breaking due left. His cutter is breaking straight down, and his splitter is breaking bottom left. It's just the pitches are going all over the place. Just the amount of distribution and movement types he has on his pitches are really unbelievable. And, there are some unbelievable pitchers out there right now. Some unbelievable young pitchers. Skeens on the Pirates has obviously been, incredible as a rookie, I believe, this year.
Yep.
But the list of guys that I would want to take as a pitcher, as a franchise in Major League Baseball, I'm really not sure there's a name above Logan Gilbert. When you think about his age and his frame and his strength, I'm not sure there's a guy you'd want.
I think, if I was a team, I would definitely take Skeens just purely for the contract. Like you get 3 more years of Skeens, but
sure. Statistically, he might be even more impressive this year anyway.
Yes, but it is one of those things where it's like Logan Gilbert is a top 5 pitcher. Like even Tariq Skubal, who's going to win the American League Cy Young, even Chris Sale, who's going to win the National League Cy Young. Like you would take Logan Gilbert over those guys if you were to build a franchise. Like that's just how it works. Those guys had awesome seasons, but Gilbert is a guy who's going to do this for the next decade. Like he's just built like that. So really just awesome things from Logan Gilbert this season. All right. Do you want to do disappointments? Do you want to do best surprise? What do you want to finish?
Let's start with disappointments so that we can end with surprise. We got to end this in a positive place, this post-mortem of the Mariners season. And I'm going to start with a disappointment. I'm almost certain you don't have him because he's disappointing for a unique reason.
Yeah.
And that is the 25-year-old right-handed reliever, Gregory Santos, who we acquired from the Chicago White Sox coming into this year. For those that have been listening from the very beginning, you know that I, maybe more than anybody else in the city of Seattle, was absolutely psyched to be bringing in Gregory Santos onto this team. I consider him one of the best relief pitchers in Major League Baseball. He's so young. He's 25. He only really started playing last year. 2 games played in 2022. 60 games he appeared in last year with a 3.4 ERA, 5 saves, 66 strikeouts, and 66 innings pitched. I was so excited for this guy to come in and to help Brash and to really bolster this bullpen.
The one time he messed up today.
Yeah. And the thing is, he just didn't play. He appeared in 8 games for the Mariners this season. Obviously, 6 of those 8 were in July. And then he just literally got back for the last 2 games of the season against the Oakland A's. And went 2 innings pitched with 1 hit and no earned runs. So 2 decent appearances with him to end the season. But he's disappointing for me because there were a lot of guys on this team that were very disappointing, but I wasn't necessarily super surprised. He is the one where it's like, I really think he is excellent. I think he's really, really good. And he just basically was unavailable for this entire year. And that was immensely disappointing to me, especially considering how many games were costed. How many games our bullpens cost us. And he could have been such a difference maker. He could have genuinely given this team 5 or 6 more wins on the season. And that would be enough to either have the top wild card or potentially even take the AL West. And that's what we missed when we missed the 2024 Gregory Santos season.
Yeah, I think you could talk Gregory Santos, you could talk Matt Brash. Early on in the season, Matt Brash had the injury as well that put him out. Had to get Tommy John. Those two guys.
Is that like an aching pain?
Those two, we talked early in the season about, in that same March 16th pod or whatever it was, we talked about how that 3-headed monster of Gregory Santos, Matt Brash, and Andres Munoz was going to be so huge for this Mariners team, and they just had to piece it together. And Gregory Santos, he wasn't disappointing necessarily in his play, but it was disappointing to acquire this guy, come into the season really with high expectations for how this bullpen was going to run, and miss. You could even I might even lump Matt Brash and Gregory Santos into this as one award, but
sure,
it was so devastating for this team so early on, and for them to come out of this season 10 games up on the Astros in June, and then you have to trade Ryan Stanek because you've used him too much. You haven't been able to use Gregory Santos or Matt Brash. It's like the bullpen kind of crumpled late in the season because of the usage rate that they had on these guys.
And we were expecting this to be maybe the best bullpen in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. And so, the Mariners obviously keep their starters in good health, but this was the one time and the first year in a long time where they've had really significant pitching injuries. And that came at the limitations on their starters and keeping their arms fresh came at the cost of losing two of your best bullpen guys. So I think there might be some discussion over the next couple seasons of especially with the new, Dan Wilson regime, letting these starters go a little bit longer, letting them flex their muscles a little bit, and hopefully keeping the bullpen a little bit more healthy, because we really, really have utilized these bullpens a lot, and these guys' arms have been toast. And it caught up to us for the first time in a while.
Totally. Yeah, that's well said. Did you agree with my Santos take, or did you have somebody else you wanted to talk about?
Yes, I want to talk. Obviously, we can't talk about biggest disappointments for this season without talking about Mitch Garver.
Yuck.
So you look at Mitch Garver's career, you take away the 2020 season, there was 23 games, he batted 167. I think he was injured as well. And he really generally plays approximately 80 games a season. He's got maybe like a 250 to 260 average. He had, his 2022 wasn't great. He hit 207, but he still had a 404 slugging. He comes into this year, he plays in 114 games. He's totally healthy for the most part. He's the guy that after we got Sebi Zavala, I was like, I still think Mitch Garver should be our backup catcher on the days that there's a lefty pitching, because Mitch Garver smashes lefties. Mitch Garver just sucked the entire season. He hit 172 with a 286 on base, so he had a decent walk rate, but that was the only thing salvaging this season for him. He had a 341 slugging and a 627 OPS, and those numbers are inflated because of that walk rate. Mitch Garver was just abysmal. His expected batting average was the lowest in Major League Baseball.
No way is that real.
Yeah. His expected batting average was 181. His strikeout percentage, he struck out in the bottom 7% of the MLB. He struck out 30.9% of the time. It just, you look at this season and you're like, what happened to this guy? And it sucked because we paid $12 million for it. It's not like this was a guy who was a rookie coming in who we thought big things were going to happen, like we did with Cal in, I think, the 2020 season or the 2021, whenever he started. It was a guy who's been a proven big leader from the Twins for so long, and then played really well in Texas in the American League West, and he just wasn't able to perform. And in some ways, I feel like this is a huge momentum guy, where it's like the start of this season playing in Seattle, he wasn't able to get off to a hot start, and it just carried throughout the entire season. The fans kind of got on his back a little bit, but at the same time, you got to be able to perform. You're a Major League Baseball player who's been in the league for 8 seasons. This level of abhorrent play is just so unexpected from this guy. So in terms of the most disappointing surprise, it had to be Mitch Garver. Mitch Haniger, I think we were both pretty out on at the start of the season. Guys like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just really tough to see.
Garver was awful, and he was awful right from the jump, as you said. There was no honeymoon period at all. At least, like Justin Turner, he came in and was really good before kind of falling apart. Garver was just awful immediately, and yeah, he was hugely disappointing. I think maybe the sting of that disappointment has been so long faded for me that I can't necessarily see it in the context of what it was, because we've known that he's been trash for 4 months now. But yeah, that was such a big signing, and he was a complete non-factor. That's hilarious that he has the worst expecting batting average. I probably could have guessed that. Having watched so many of his at-bats, how pensive he's been at the plate. Yeah. A big old thank you to Mitch Garver for a nothing burger of the season.
Yeah. And I honestly expect him to be back next year. We will see what happens. But I would expect the Mariners
he cannot be worse. It's impossible. Literally last in the MLB in expecting batting average. Maybe we can improve from that.
Yeah.
Maybe some bad rookies will come in or something. All right, let's end this conversation and this podcast with a positive discussion. The biggest positive surprise of the 2024 MLB season, to me, the choice is obvious, and it is no other than Mr. DC himself, 27-year-old Victor Robles, who came into this team and just put on a show. This is a guy that we acquired from Washington. He'd had an amazing year last year, batting essentially .300 for them, and then came out of the gate struggling. And Washington saw an opportunity to move a guy based on that performance last year. Say, hey, there's some value here. Let's get off this guy. Send him to the Mariners. They'll never know. And it turns out that he's still that guy and was just in a slump. He finished this year batting .307, 34 stolen bases, 78 hits, 814 OPS. This is a guy who's now, over the last 2 seasons, is batting .304 average. And I know you're not just an average guy. You know I favor average too much. But one thing I can tell you is, if you're batting over .300, you are an excellent contributor to an offense. Not only has he done that, his fielding has been a lot better than I expected. 94th percentile in arm strength, 74th percentile in arm value. He is, a lightning bolt of an arm out there in center field. And he's really deadly on the base paths. 34 stolen bases. He only had 8 last year. That's a part of his game he's obviously put a lot of work into. The coaches have put a lot of time into turning him into a much more deadly on-base weapon, and he is one. 27 years old. I think we just signed him to a 3-year deal. Is there a bigger surprise and a bigger steal this year in Major League Baseball than Victor Robles?
No, there's not. The 30, it's crazy. He had 8 steals. He played 36 games last year in 2023. He had 8 steals. He had 4 in 14 with Washington before getting DFA'd. He had 30 in 77 games with the Mariners. That just shows the Mariners kind of letting him do his thing. I think it's not even necessarily like, oh, this guy is so good at getting stolen bases and we unlocked this potential in him. This is a guy who's been, in my mind, hamstrung by being on the Washington Nationals and them wanting him to play a certain way, to do a certain thing. This guy grew up and he was a top 5 prospect when he came into the league in 2017. He's been a great player his entire life, and I think if you have a bad stretch, especially as a guy who's been great your entire life, that can kind of you can get a momentum of awfulness. And so the Mariners, to change his scenery, guy, he got to a new place and they kind of just said, hey, you do you, be kind of a menace on the base paths, do whatever you need to do. And it really showed in just the way that he played with this team, the way that he bonded with this team, and the fact that I think they gave him 2 guaranteed years at $4 million apiece with an option in the 3rd year, if I remember correctly. I don't off the top of my head, but that something like good. That. A really great guy to add to this team, and this outfield going forward with the addition of Victor Robles and Randy Arozarena, I'm excited for this team, and for this guy as a Mariner.
Yeah, this is a guy that when we acquired him from the Nationals, his batting average was .087. He wasn't even batting 100 for the Nats when he came over. And obviously, every single month since then, you've seen his average climb, up to where it is now. Just an absolute reaching into the pockets of the Nationals to take this guy. This is candy from a baby style theft. And I wish I felt bad, but I don't. And I'm so glad he's going to be on this team for a couple more years. Big acquisition.
Yep. Oh, I love it. Victor Robles, one of the just exciting guys of this team. All right, let's wrap it up. This has been a very long pod, and I know John is a very tired boy. Let's talk my biggest surprise. It's going to be a little different. I have Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller, you may be thinking, why is this a surprise? We've known Bryce Miller was great. He was great last year. Listen, Bryce Miller he's in the same boat as Logan Gilbert. He is going to get top 10 Cy Young votes. This guy was amazing this season. You see the amount of break that he has on his pitches in terms of his fastball and off-speed pitches. You look in Baseball Savant, his run value. What that means is his ball moves to the left, to the right. Everything that you can ask for from this guy as a pitcher in terms of horizontal movement, what he wanted to capitalize on was expounded upon, and then he also developed a splitter. This guy's got movement in all three of the main directions a baseball can go, unless you're playing softball. It's the guy was amazing. He's got a whip of .98, which is, I believe, in the top 10 or top 5 of all pitchers in Major League Baseball. Ended up throwing 180.1 innings, 171 strikeouts, only allowing 59 earned runs, 21 home runs allowed, which is obviously 5 less than Logan Gilbert, who we talked about earlier. This guy was so great this season. And I think the real issue came when he would face lefties. You look at his splits, he struggled sometimes against left-handed hitters. Batters, he had a whip of 1.11 against left-handed hitters and .84 against right-handed hitters. He still has room to improve, is what I loved about Bryce Miller's season. It's like, this guy was awesome. He had an expected ERA that was, I think, a full run higher than what his actual ERA was. His expected ERA was 3.72. His ERA at the end of the season, let me just make sure, was 2.94. So 0.8 more. But you look at this guy, he's got room to improve. He's kind of the Logan Gilbert of this team right now. He's much more of a cerebral pitcher, just like Logan Gilbert. And I think this was the turn up year for Bryce Miller. I think this is kind of his Logan Gilbert's third year in my mind. Last year for Logan Gilbert was awesome. It was a great step forward. Bryce Miller was awesome this year. He's got another groove to take, one more step to take.
Yeah, I think that's 100% fair. And to go from good to great as a pitcher in baseball is a bigger step than I think a lot of people see it as, but it is. And he really is taking that step. And it's pretty crazy to think in 1 year we've gotten to the point where I don't think George Kirby is one of our best two pitchers.
Yeah.
I would rather have Logan and I would rather have Bryce. And Bryce has been so good. And to see him improve on the areas of weakness we saw last year, improve his pitching in tight spots, improve his pitching in early innings, keeping his head when things are going wrong around him. He's gotten so much better. Attitude-wise, he's been better out there. He's just been a real pro this season. Still a young kid, still a fun guy. I love Bryce. You talked a lot of the statistical things, but yeah, we really saw it. I'm excited for next year. I don't know how much more room there is for him to go up just because he's already so great, but I'm excited to see if he can, break into the Logan Gilbert top, 5 pitchers in the AL conversation. That'd be very exciting.
Yeah. Just wanted to shout him out because, we've talked a little bit about him throughout the season, but he's definitely been a guy who has had his ups and downs. We've talked about it. But he earned it. The end of this season was awesome, and he definitely floated throughout the entirety of it. All right. You can hear my voice is fading. Anything else to say, John, about any of these teams before we hop off?
Take me home.
All right. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright. This has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a follow or subscribe or whatever that is. You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can email us your questions, comments, concerns about why we're recording this at 11:30 at night at soundupseattle@gmail.com. And you can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere that's important. And you can find John
swinging a hammer in a field out in Central Washington tomorrow. Come find me.
Love it. With all that being said, let's go Dogs, baby.
Go Dogs. It's got to be the Dogs. Come on, Boom.